Iran just announced it mined the Strait of Hormuz, and somehow that is not even the most alarming part of this story. The most alarming part is that they used the mines to redraw the shipping map of an international waterway that is not theirs. Welcome! And today we are going deeper than the ceasefire headlines into what Iran actually did and what it permanently changes. We are covering 5 things: the mine announcement, the new map, the Oman problem, the VHF broadcast, and the tanker order boom. By the end of this video, you will understand why this week's developments are more significant than anything that came before them. Let us start with the mine announcement because the details matter more than the headline. And the details are genuinely jaw-dropping. Iran's deputy foreign minister told ITV News that the Strait of Hormuz is open to all civilian shipping without restriction. However, due to mines placed during the war, all vessels need to liaise with Iran to be guided along safe routes. Quote, anybody who communicates with Iranian authorities has permission to pass, which is the most polite extortion I have ever heard. Let us unpack that sentence because it is doing an enormous amount of diplomatic work in a very small number of words. Iran is saying the strait is open, but there are mines, and only we know where they are, so you need our permission. The UAE Minister of Industry, Dr. Sultan Al-Jaber, responded immediately, open the strait unconditionally, no strings attached, full stop. The UAE position is exactly right, and it puts the core issue in plain language that no diplomat can misinterpret or spin. The Strait of Hormuz is not open when access is restricted, conditioned, and controlled by one party holding a mine map. Conditional passage is not passage, it is control with better branding. And Iran has been very good at the branding part. Now here is the first thing most coverage is completely missing, and it is arguably the most important legal detail in this story. The Strait of Hormuz was not built, engineered, financed, or constructed by any nation. It is a natural geographic formation. It is governed by the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, which guarantees transit as a right, not a privilege. A right that can be granted, withheld, or weaponized is not a right, it is a permission slip. And that distinction is enormous. Iran is not a signatory to UNCLOS, and neither is the United States, but customary international law applies regardless of signatures. There is also a UN Charter argument worth examining. Specifically, Article 51, which covers the right of self-defense during armed conflict. Iran could argue it has the right to restrict passage as a defensive measure while under active military attack from the United States. That argument is legally interesting but falls apart the moment you look at which waters Iran is actually claiming to have mined. Because here's the part of this story that should be generating far more outrage than it currently is, so lean in. The area Iran claims to have mined is not primarily Iranian territorial waters. A significant portion is actually Omani waters. Iran just declared a maritime hazard zone in waters belonging to Oman, a sovereign nation that had nothing to do with this conflict. Oman has been serving as the quiet diplomatic intermediary between Iran and the United States throughout these negotiations. Iran effectively mined the front yard of the country that is actively trying to help them reach a diplomatic settlement. Think about that. This is either an extraordinary diplomatic miscalculation or a deliberate signal to Oman about who holds the actual leverage in this situation. Either way, the Oman dimension is a full diplomatic crisis running inside the larger Iran-US crisis that almost nobody is discussing publicly. Now let us talk about what Iran has actually done, because the mine announcement is only part of a much larger operational picture. Iran has published an official new traffic separation scheme for the Strait of Hormuz and communicated it to all vessels in the region. A traffic separation scheme is essentially a shipping lane management system, the maritime equivalent of highway lane markings and speed limits. Every major strait in the world has one, and they are normally established by the International Maritime Organization through international consensus. Iran just published their own, unilaterally, for a waterway they do not fully own, without asking the IMO or anyone else for permission. This is the first time in modern maritime history that a nation has unilaterally redrawn the shipping lanes of an international strait. Let us look at what this new map actually shows, because the geography reveals exactly what Iran is trying to achieve strategically here. Under Iran's new scheme, the inbound lane now passes through the channel between Larak Island and Qisham Island, both in Iranian waters. The outbound lane cuts south of Larak Island and crosses the traditional traffic separation scheme, also routing through Iranian territorial waters. The old standard lanes pass primarily through Omani waters, where Iran had limited legal authority and limited ability to impose conditions. The new lanes shift traffic directly into Iranian territorial waters, where Iran has full legal jurisdiction over every vessel transiting through. In other words, Iran used the mine threat to herd the entire global shipping industry into their own territorial waters on a permanent basis. If that sounds like something out of a geopolitical thriller, that is because it is, and it worked exactly as the strategists intended. Lloyd's List confirmed this analysis from EOS Risk Group's head of advisory Martin Kelly, who called it a fundamental reshaping of Hormuz transits. According to Kelly, Iran instructed commercial vessels to avoid traditional lanes and instead use alternate corridors near Larak Island as the new normal. The genius of using mines as the justification is that it provides Iran with a permanent legal cover for maintaining this routing arrangement indefinitely, as long as Iran claims mines might still be present. Every ship in the world has an incentive to use the Iran-approved route voluntarily. And this brings us to the second major insight of this story, one that completely changes how you should think about the mine announcement. Here is the critical question. Nobody in mainstream coverage is asking, did Iran actually lay any mines at all in the strait? The Joint Maritime Information Center, which monitors the region with combined forces from multiple navies, has not confirmed any mines were laid. The United States has maintained continuous surveillance in the strait using sail drones, motorized drones, and aerial observation assets throughout the crisis. The JMIC stated clearly that no mines have been confirmed, and with that level of surveillance coverage, we would likely know. Which means Iran may have achieved the full strategic effect of a minefield without placing a single physical mine in the water. This is one of the most important strategic concepts to understand about modern maritime conflict. You do not need mines to create a minefield. The threat of mines, credibly delivered to the shipping community, achieves every operational objective that actual physical mines would achieve. Ships stop moving. Insurance premiums spike, captains demand mine clearance certificates, and routing changes permanently, all without a single mine deployed. Iran announced mines and immediately published a safe alternative route through Iranian waters, a package deal that was clearly designed in advance. The announcement and the alternative route arrived together as a coordinated package, which does not look like a reactive crisis response to anyone. This is information warfare applied to maritime domain, and it is arguably more effective and significantly cheaper than physically mining a strait. Now, let us talk about the VHF Channel 16 broadcast, because this is the detail that has received the least attention but deserves the most. VHF Channel 16 is the International Distress and Safety Channel. Every vessel at sea monitors it continuously as a matter of maritime law. Iran broadcast a message on Channel 16 stating that transiting the strait without Iranian permission would result in the vessel being destroyed. That broadcast was heard simultaneously by every ship captain, every Coast Guard, and every naval officer within radio range of the strait. Iran did not issue this through a diplomatic note to the United Nations or through a formal communication to the IMO. They broadcast it directly to the maritime community in real time, bypassing every diplomatic protocol that would have created a formal response process. This is how Iran established facts on the water, not through negotiations, not through legal frameworks, but through a live radio broadcast. By broadcasting on an international emergency channel, Iran forced the entire global shipping community to treat the message as an operational reality immediately. A ship captain hearing that message on Channel 16 cannot wait for diplomatic clarification. He has to make a decision right now. The answer to that decision for virtually every captain in the strait that day was the same: stop the ship and wait. This is the third major insight of this story. Iran weaponized the maritime communication system itself as an instrument of strategic coercion. And unlike military force, a radio broadcast on the International Emergency Channel creates no legal basis for a counter-response under the laws of war. Now let us look at the actual ship movement data. Because data does not have a press secretary and does not take diplomatic positions. Tanker trackers, which uses both AIS tracking and satellite visual confirmation, published their analysis 10 hours after the ceasefire announcement. Their finding was clear: we are not seeing much happening. Traffic is not moving, and we are still in single-digit transits per day. What makes tanker trackers particularly reliable is that they track vessels both through AIS signals and through actual satellite visual identification. Even ships running dark, meaning AIS transponders off, will appear on satellites when they cross a monitoring threshold at either end of the strait. So, when tanker tracker says traffic is not moving, they mean AIS confirmed traffic plus satellite confirmed traffic combined is still in single digits daily. Normal operating conditions produce 138 ships per day transiting the strait. We are at less than 10, consistently, since the crisis began. That is a 93% reduction in commercial traffic flowing through the most critical energy corridor on the face of the planet. The AIS spoofing that Iran was using earlier in the crisis fake positions. Ships appearing on land has substantially decreased according to JMIC. The reduction in spoofing suggests the situation has shifted from chaotic active conflict into something more deliberate, organized, and institutionalized. What we are seeing now is not the chaos of war, it is the administration of a controlled choke point operating according to a published protocol. Iran is not closing the strait, not spoofing signals wildly, and not firing on ships indiscriminately. They are managing a toll booth system. The mine announcement and new traffic scheme simply upgraded that toll booth from a suggestion to a physical compliance mechanism with legal cover. Now let us talk about the International Maritime Organization, because the IMO's response this week was unusually direct for that particular institution. The IMO issued a statement saying that imposing a toll on ships sailing through the critical Strait of Hormuz sets a dangerous precedent. They cited UNCLOS directly ships enjoy the right of transit passage through international straits, and states bordering straits shall not hamper that right. The phrase "shall not hamper" is important. It does not say should try not to hamper or may consider not hampering. The language is mandatory and absolute, and it applies regardless of whether the bordering state has signed UNCLOS or not as customary law. But here's the problem with IMO statements, and I say this with respect for the institution. They have no enforcement mechanism whatsoever. The IMO can issue all the statements it wants without naval enforcement. Those statements are strongly worded suggestions on nice letterhead. And that gap between legal principle and enforcement reality is precisely where Iran has built its entire strategic position in this crisis. Iran is not disputing the law. They are simply operating in the space between what the law says and what anyone will actually enforce. This is sophisticated legal judo. Use the ambiguity of self-defense claims and the enforcement gap in international maritime law simultaneously. Now let us look at the U.S. military posture in the strait, because understanding what we have there matters for assessing what comes next. The United States has maintained a presence in the strait not with warships, but with sail drones, motorized drones, and aerial surveillance assets. These are primarily ISR platforms: intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, meaning they observe and report rather than engage and enforce. The U.S. Navy has literal combat ships in the region, each carrying 2 remote-controlled mine-hunting vessels for potential clearance operations. But mine clearance in a contested waterway requires time, specialized equipment, and military protection for the clearance vessels themselves during operations. Even if mines are confirmed, clearing a strait of the size and complexity of Hormuz could take weeks under the best possible conditions. There is an option on the table: run an empty bulk carrier or tanker through the new Iranian route and see what happens. Put Marines aboard. Add air defense and anti-drone capability. Run a destroyer behind it and find out empirically whether the route is safe. This is not as reckless as it sounds. It is essentially the same concept as a minesweeper, just larger and with more deterrence capability. But it requires a commitment from U.S. military leadership to enter that space with purpose. And that commitment has not yet been made visibly. The challenge is that the current U.S. drone assets in the region have monitoring and ISR capability, but limited offensive or defensive strike capability. What would genuinely help is armed drone coverage with both strike capability against surface threats and defense capability against aerial drone attacks. Right now, what we have are essentially sophisticated sail drones that can see everything but cannot do very much about what they see. Watching a crisis and being able to respond to it are two very different operational capabilities, and that gap matters enormously right now. Now here is the story angle that every financial outlet is missing, while they focus entirely on oil prices and ceasefire negotiations. BIMCO, the world's largest shipping association, reported that the global tanker order book has hit a 17-year high as of Q1 2026. The global ship order book reached 191 million compensated gross tons, and the primary driver is the highest crude tanker contracting quarter in history. Translation while ships cannot move through the Strait of Hormuz. Shipping companies are ordering new ships at a historically unprecedented rate. This seems paradoxical until you understand how maritime economics actually work during supply disruptions, which is counterintuitively straightforward. When Hormuz closes, the ships that can move anywhere else in the world command dramatically higher freight rates almost immediately. Higher freight rates mean the shipping companies that own available vessels are generating exceptional revenue from routes that bypass the disrupted corridor. That exceptional revenue gets reinvested into new vessel orders, because high freight rate environments are exactly when new ships pencil out financially. So the Hormuz crisis is simultaneously creating a shipping shortage and triggering an investment boom to build the ships to eventually resolve that shortage. The beneficiaries of this investment boom are the shipyards primarily in South Korea, China, and Japan, not American consumers at the gas pump. There is a brutal irony in the fact that the greatest energy crisis in a generation is generating the greatest tanker construction boom in a generation. And here is the second irony. Those new tankers ordered today will not be delivered for 3 to 5 years after the order is placed. Which means the shipping capacity shortage created by this crisis will persist in the market long after the political crisis itself is resolved. The economic ripple of what is happening at Hormuz right now will be visible in freight rates and consumer prices well into the 2030s. Now let us step back and look at what Iran has actually achieved this week, because the full picture is more alarming than any single headline. In a single week, Iran announced mines, published a new traffic scheme, forced ships into Iranian waters, and broadcast threats on international emergency channels. Each of these actions individually would be a significant escalation. Together, they represent a comprehensive strategic realignment of the Strait's operational reality. Iran has not just choked the Strait, they have installed themselves as the permanent operating authority of the world's most critical energy corridor. They have done this through a combination of military threat, information warfare, unilateral cartography, and emergency radio broadcasts. Without firing a single shot this week, Iran has fundamentally changed the question from whether ships can pass to whether they need Iranian permission to pass. And once the permission system is operational for long enough, it becomes the new normal. The question of its legitimacy gradually stops being asked. This is how strategic facts are established without wars gradually, through institutional friction, until alternatives become so inconvenient they are abandoned. The analogy is not the Berlin Wall, it is the Berlin bureaucracy, the paperwork, the checkpoints, the forms required before anything can happen. Control through administration is harder to oppose than control through force, because there is no single dramatic moment where resistance clearly becomes necessary. Now let us talk about the escalation question, because the logical next step in this situation has a specific historical template worth examining carefully. The last time the United States faced a mine threat in the Persian Gulf combined with attacks on commercial shipping was 1987 and 1988. That situation produced Operation Earnest Will, the U.S. Navy directly escorting reflagged Kuwaiti tankers through contested waters under military protection. Earnest Will worked because it demonstrated a clear, sustained U.S. commitment to free navigation that Iran could not counter without direct military confrontation. The question in 2026 is whether the current administration has the appetite to commit to that level of operational presence in the Strait again. Reports suggesting the administration may accept some Iranian coordination role in transit management suggest that appetite may be limited right now. Any ceasefire language that acknowledges Iranian authority over Hormuz transit procedures in any form makes the earnest will approach politically impossible. You cannot simultaneously acknowledge Iranian coordination rights and then escort ships through without Iranian coordination. The positions are mutually exclusive. This is the trap embedded in the current ceasefire negotiations. Accepting any Iranian role today forecloses every escalatory response option tomorrow. Now, let us talk about what the shipping industry needs to see before commercial vessels will voluntarily return to normal transit operations. The answer comes directly from the shipping companies themselves, and it is more specific than most political commentary is acknowledging publicly. They need verification that the mine threat is cleared, not a diplomatic statement, but actual mine-sweeping operations with certified all-clear documentation. They need demonstrated transits of the traditional Omani waters route, not the new Iranian waters route, with vessels arriving safely at their destinations. They need war risk insurance rates to return to something approaching normal, which will only happen when the first condition is consistently verified. And they need clarity about whether the Bitcoin toll system will remain operational or whether it has been permanently eliminated from the ceasefire terms. Until all four of those conditions are met simultaneously, commercial shipping companies will not voluntarily send loaded tankers through that corridor. Individual ship captains and individual insurance underwriters make these decisions, not governments, and they are making them based on verifiable risk data. The insurance market is the most honest signal in this entire crisis because insurers price risk based on actual probability assessment, not political statements. When war risk premiums normalize, that will tell you more about the real security situation than any press conference from any government. Now let us address the question that a lot of viewers are asking: what is the end game here? And how does this eventually resolve itself? There are essentially three possible outcomes, and they are not equally likely given what we have seen Iran build over the past several months. Outcome 1, a full diplomatic settlement that removes all conditions on transit, verifiably clears mines, and ends the Bitcoin toll system permanently. This is the best outcome and the one that produces the fastest return to normal shipping volumes across all the affected global trade routes. But it requires Iran to walk away from an institutionalized revenue stream and a strategic position they have spent months deliberately constructing. Nations generally do not voluntarily surrender strategic positions they have invested significant resources in building unless faced with a credible counter-threat. Outcome 2. A partial settlement that includes language acknowledging some form of Iranian coordination role, the most likely diplomatic outcome right now. This outcome produces a nominal ceasefire and gradual traffic recovery, but embeds Iran's choke point control into international diplomatic practice permanently. It is the outcome that looks like a win in the short term and reads as a historic capitulation when the history books are written. Outcome 3, military escalation that physically removes Iran's ability to threaten the Strait, followed by sustained naval escort operations. This is the most effective long-term outcome but has the highest short-term cost and requires sustained political will over an extended operational period. The historical evidence from both the Barbary Wars and Operation Earnest Will suggests this is the approach that produces durable results in the long run. Where we currently appear to be heading is somewhere between Outcome 1 and Outcome 2, which historically is the least durable of all possible resolutions. Let us close with the thing that matters most, and that is getting the least attention in all of this geopolitical and strategic analysis. Right now, approximately 1,000 ships carrying 20,000 merchant sailors are still anchored inside the Persian Gulf with no clear end date. These are civilian workers, engineers, cooks, able seamen, officers who are trapped by decisions made in rooms they were never invited into. Every ceasefire announcement, every diplomatic framework, every strategic analysis discusses oil prices and shipping lane access and geopolitical leverage. Almost none of it contains a single specific provision about when those 20,000 human beings will be allowed to leave and go home. The mine announcement makes their situation more complicated because now every ship in the Gulf needs mine clearance certification before commercial movement resumes. These sailors are being held not by bars and locks but by mine maps, insurance clauses, and bureaucratic permission systems, which is harder to photograph. 40-plus days in the Persian Gulf in April and May heat, with diminishing provisions and a satellite internet connection that barely supports a video call. The humanitarian question and the strategic question are not separate. The 20,000 trapped sailors are the most honest data point about what this costs. If the strait is genuinely open and the crisis is genuinely resolving, those ships should be moving, and they are not moving yet. Watch marine traffic, watch tanker trackers, watch the war risk insurance rates. Those three sources will tell you the truth before any press conference does. The new map Iran published this week is not a safety measure. It is a permanent territorial claim dressed in navigational safety language. The mines may or may not be real, but the routing change they justified is very real and is already operating as the new de facto standard. The VHF broadcast on Channel 16 was not a military action. It was a real-time declaration of sovereign authority over an international waterway. The tanker order boom is not a sign of market confidence. It is the shipping industry building the capacity to route around this problem permanently. And the Oman dimension. The fact that Iran declared a hazard zone in Omani waters is a diplomatic time bomb that is not yet fully detonated. What we are witnessing is not a ceasefire. It is a strategic consolidation happening under the diplomatic cover of a ceasefire announcement. Iran entered this week controlling a choke point through threat and ambiguity. They are exiting this week controlling it through published maps and legal frameworks. That is a meaningful upgrade in the durability of their position. And it happened while the world was watching ceasefire press conferences instead. The question for the next 72 hours is not whether a ceasefire will hold it, is whether any agreement addresses what Iran actually built this week. Specifically, does the agreement eliminate the new traffic separation scheme or legitimize it by accepting Iran's mine safety justification as valid? Does the agreement address the Oman territorial waters issue, or does it simply ignore the fact that Iran claimed jurisdiction over another nation's sea? Does the agreement require verified mine clearance of the traditional Omani route before commercial shipping is expected to resume normal operations? And does the agreement explicitly state that the Bitcoin toll system, in any form, under any name, has zero legal standing going forward? If the answer to all four questions is yes, this crisis has a path to genuine resolution and eventually to fully restored commercial traffic. If the answer to any of those questions is no or unclear, the crisis has been paused, not resolved, and the pause has a known expiration date. The treaty text, not the press conference summary, is where the real answer lives, and that text has not been published at the time of this recording. So, here is what to watch for. Specifically, the language analysts and maritime lawyers will be examining with microscopes when it does appear. Watch for the phrase in coordination with Iranian authorities if it appears in any transit-related clause. The toll booth has been diplomatically recognized. Watch for the phrase safety routing if it appears as justification for the new traffic scheme. The unilateral map has been legitimized through the agreement. Watch for the presence or absence of any timeline for mine clearance operations and any specification of who conducts those operations and where exactly. And watch the marine traffic data starting 48 hours after any agreement is announced, because ships will vote with their hulls before diplomats vote with their pens. If we see 50 ships transiting per day within a week, the agreement has substance and credibility in the eyes of the commercial shipping industry. If we see 10 ships per day 2 weeks after the agreement is paper and the chokehold is still operational regardless of what it says. Iran has drawn a new map, broadcast a new authority, and planted a new legal framework into the strait this week, all simultaneously and without firing a shot. Whether that new reality gets erased by the diplomatic process or embedded into it is the only question that actually matters right now. And the answer will be visible in the marine traffic data, the Lloyd's insurance rates, and the text of whatever agreement eventually emerges from these negotiations. We will be tracking all three of those indicators closely and reporting back the moment any of them shows a meaningful change in either direction. If you found this breakdown useful, share it. The more people understand what Iran actually did this week, the better the public debate will be. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you get the next update the moment something significant changes in the shipping data or the treaty text. The ships are the honest signal. Watch the ships, not the statements, and you will know what is actually happening before everyone else does.